Well, good afternoon one more time. Welcome one, welcome all. Here on your afternoon drive, live with Mapunga J, broadcasting from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's a privilege and an honor again to have all of you into this intellectual space where we are questioning things, where we are seeking for African solution. Here you are on your afternoon channel, live with Mapunga J on your channel where we're discussing African politics, African science, African medicine, African theology, African art, African medicines, fashion, relationships, and politics, governance, architecture, pharmaceuticals, child discipline, and everything else between. The whole idea is to get the African people beginning to talk about African issues, and where we discuss the issue of African religion prior to colonization. But that's not why I'm calling today. Today I'm calling rather on a more sober, not so excited, not so sad. A few weeks ago or a few months ago, many of you were here on this platform, and you heard us fighting and shouting and screaming when people were drinking the petrol, people were eating flowers, people were dooming each other, and some of our pastors here in Johannesburg said that they had resurrected people from the dead, and some claimed that they had gone to heaven and taken selfies with Jesus, with God, and all sorts of interesting events that happened. And I, being a social commentator in my own right, I decided that I was not going to be silent when such things are happening. So I came up on the platform and I challenged some of those perspectives. I challenged some of those ministers, and I challenged some of those theologians. Some of you have also seen me sitting here fighting and challenging religious systems, fighting and challenging pharmaceuticals, fighting and challenging political systems and social ills. I've spoken about justice. I've spoken about social justice. I've tried as much as possible to be as objective as I possibly can in my own world, with my own limited understanding on the issues that are on the ground. However, when I went to Kenya a few weeks ago, if not, actually last week when I was in Kenya, I happened to have read an article of the problem that was happening in Kenya, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Kenya, and how members had boxed and beaten each other up in church over various issues. And in the same wavelength, there came up a white Jesus in Kenya, and some of you may remember me again commenting and passing comments around the issue of the white Jesus, and actually that's the reason why I got suspended from Facebook. It was some of the comments that I had passed in regards to the white Jesus idea. And when I went to Kenya that same weekend when I was there, or as fate would have it, I am born Seventh-day Adventist. For some of you who did not know, I have grown up in the church. I went to the Adventist schools, but as time has it, we all grow in one way or the other. But now, when I was there, that weekend when I was there, another disaster broke out again, which happened to have been last week, when members of the church went there again, and people were scratching each other in front of the church, and people the church was locked up. Guards came to the site, and one of my lawyer friends, the Professor Ojwang, and my friend Gachuva, and other guys, we managed to get the news as it was happening from some of our friends who were actually live on the center. And I tried to put my head around the issues around the Kenyan saga as to what exactly is happening in that church, which is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then I had stuff that I had always known, but I was not very clear about, that some of one of those churches, actually the Kenya Central Church, happens to be falling in the hands of a few individuals who are managing it, who are actually owning it, as it were. This happens to be the biggest church in the union in that for their own benefit. And west, still in the shadows of that thing, is also the issue that the General Conference is coming up next year, and many of the members within this particular church, the Central Church, actually have been controlling the political arena, so to speak. And without necessarily wasting too much time on the Kenyan saga, I wanted to see that, and then I remembered I'm from South Africa, I did not have enough latitude to complain about the Kenyan stories, because we also in South Africa here apparently have our own equal amount of problems and challenges along the same path of political and religious commentary and social issues. Now, here in South Africa, it is a fact that the church, particularly the Seventh Adventist Church, is actually divided between whites and blacks. When I was in Noma Linda at Noma Linda University, I actually managed to see that you have Nigerian churches, you have Ghanaian churches, you have Korean churches, you have Chinese churches, you have Ethiopian churches, then you have Black American churches, you have white churches, you have Spanish churches, you have Brazilian churches, which for me, from where I'm sitting right now, for the purpose of the conversation today, might think that there's no problem at all with such amount of segregation, particularly if it is done in the light that every congregation wants to worship the way they want to worship, in their own language, in their own expression, and in their own culture, and etc. Now, if in the international market and in the international community, people are free to function and work in the spaces which they want to work without any segregation, without any marginalization, then why is it that in Africa we are not at liberty to worship the way we want to worship? That could be the first conversation that we want to have, actually. That international churches, particularly today, I want to focus on the case study, my case on the Seventh Adventist Church, so that is more relevant. That when you get to America and the North American division, people there are free to function and worship in the spaces that they want to worship without necessarily feeling marginalized. And when you come to Africa, therefore, you find that there is all this standardization process where people only must worship, only must be at church in a certain fashion. That's number one. Number two, we find that particularly in the South African context, the church finds itself in a conundrum where it is actually, as it were, trapped in a racial discriminative environment where apartheid and segregation was rife and is still rife in the country. When the political guns stopped, the economic guns and the religious guns are still blazing. The conferences and the unions in the greater South African, say SID, Southern African Division, SAU, Southern African Union, are still divided on racial grounds. Are divided on color. We have colored conferences in Cape Town. We have black conferences around Johannesburg. We have white conferences. And of course, some of our black people are the biggest patrons on the white conferences side, particularly my Zimbabwean friends who come from Zimbabwe, who are apparently supposed to be the most educated in Africa, but the most culturally disoriented bunch of people, group of people, and nation of people that I've ever seen on the face of the earth. Our education has not helped us. We may undermine and downplay the South Africans, but South Africans are actually more culturally alert than many of my quote-unquote educated Zimbabwean friends. But that's not the debate for today. We can argue about that some other day. But we find that in the South African environment, that the organization that calls itself a Christian church is actually divided on racial grounds, where the blacks are on one side, the coloreds are on one side, and the white people are on the other side. I live on the eastern side, which is a Benoni side, where if members can visit other churches in Benoni, here in South Africa, in a black Africa, if you visit some other churches here in Africa, you'll actually be told to move away from those churches and go to another church down the street, down the road, where people like you are worshiping. Even cars can be donated so that you are driven out of those churches to those smaller congregations or bigger congregations where the fellow black people are worshiping. Now, I hope you can get my point to where I'm going with this. We have a problem in Kenya, which is actually emanating from power and control over the religious system. Then we have a racially discriminatory space in South Africa where the church is actually divided on racial grounds. Worse still, the church survived during apartheid era, having prime properties within the greater CBDs of town. The question is, how did the church end up getting such prime properties, if by any chance they were not actually supporting and in cahoots with the apartheid government? Question number two, is it possible that denominationalism and religious organizations actually have not, particularly I'm speaking from an Adventist perspective, have not been honest enough to deal, fight, challenge status quos in terms of racial discrimination? I know for a fact that my church has a policy on same-sex marriage, We have a policy on tithes and offerings. We have a policy on polygamers. We have polygamies. We have policies on many other issues. But I wonder, what is our policy on racial discrimination? What is our policy on land, for example? And if these policies are in place, to say the least, are these policies practical? Are they being applied? Are they useful? Are they being implemented? And if they are still available, when are they going to be implemented? Is it not hypocrisy that we can be talking about the unity that we shall have in the kingdom of heaven when we can't discuss the same unity while we are still on earth? Why is it that discussing these things on social media and social spaces is deemed as embarrassing the church? The question is the church willing to fix these things? And if so, by when are they willing to fix these things? The church has been functioning for more than 200 years, for argument's sake. When are these issues going to be discussed? When are we going to have a direct social intervention program? I don't mean programs of dishing and giving food and going around giving people second-hand clothes and second-hand shoes. Then we say that is our social responsibility. I mean a more sustainable approach in terms of changing the political, the social environment in which the church is functioning. And I hope that by doing this, I'm being fair, that the church that I may sympathize with, which is the Seventh Adventist Church, I will not sit here and apologize and cover up their wound because my mother and my father, my cousins and my sisters are still worshiping in those churches. Therefore, I would practice, as it were, to avoid addressing these issues. I want to state it on record and put it clear that I'm not a friend of nobody. If I want to be a friend of anybody, I would rather be a friend of truth than be a friend of organizations. Because organization, by essence, belong to people. And in their belonging to people, they will always have the DNA of the owners of those organizations. And therefore, I want to start challenging and say, from where I'm sitting right now, I would find it very difficult that we can be preaching and talking about concepts of unity in the kingdom to come, unity in the heavens, unity when we live with God, when we are failing to discuss unity now, when we are still living with each other. How and what will be the difference when we get to heaven? What is it that you are going to be able to do in heaven which you can't do on earth? What is it that you will share in heaven which you can't share on earth? The next question is, are you ever, if ever, will you even make it into the heavens that you are speaking about? I hope you can hear from where I'm coming from to where I am to where I'm going, that the church needed a more honest approach in terms of its social discussions, its social conversations. And this particular video specifically, I have targeted and have decided to drive this message straight to the greater Seventh-day Adventist community in South Africa, in the Southern African Hemisphere, in Kenya, and to the rest of the world. The General Conference might not want to discuss this with you. Your division offices may not want to discuss this with you. Your conferences right now are conflicted. They cannot even address these issues of social involvement. What is our policy, for example, on land distribution without compensation? What is our policy on sanctions? When countries like Zimbabwe, for example, are on sanction, and in the midst of the sanction, the Seventh Adventist Church moved its head offices from Harare to come to South Africa because of economic reasons. What is it that caused the move? And why is it that the church did not stand up to oppose, to challenge, to fight, to question issues of government involvement? Why must we always remain pacified, remain silenced, remain muted when it comes to addressing social issues? That's hypocrisy. If what is happening in the country affects the people, the church should be the voice of the people. If people are being oppressed, the church should oppose that. If people are being abused, the church should address that. If people are being ripped off economically, the church should address that. If there's no political instability, the church should also get involved in all those things, because the members whom the church claims to be leading are not living in a vacuum, but they are living in the midst of an environment, whether it is contaminated, it is unstable, it is corrupt, it is diseased. Whatever the condition of the community is, the church cannot absolve itself and stand away and say, we don't want to get involved in the things of the world. The things of the world are the things of the members. The things of the world are the things that are affecting the very parish members that ministers are supposed to be leading. So I want to say, whether you are an Adventist, you are a Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Evangelical, Pentecostal, Charismatic, and etc., I will not be quiet when I notice and I see some injustices happening. And for today, this one was directed directly to my grandfather, my father's church where he used to go, the Seventh Adventist Church. When are we going to unite as a church? Are we ever going to see a church that is consolidated, black, white, colored, and Indian? In the South African space, are we ever going to have common grounds of understanding? Will the church ever come forward and apologize for being involved in apartheid and etc.? How can it be that even our colleges that we have, like colleges like Helderberg, for example, black students still find it difficult to access those institutions? I was there the other day running a program for them, and some of the white students left the hall where I was talking, and they went to have their own meeting in another hall, in a Christian environment, where fellow members who claim to be of the same denomination cannot tolerate talking, singing, worshiping together. This is the hypocrisy that turns me off 1,000 times, because I cannot afford to live in a space that constantly promotes, manages, and seeks to silence contamination at this kind of a level. You can say what you want, cut and paste this video, send it to the union, send it to the division, send it to the general conference. When the union, the division, the conferences, and the local conferences have now united and have become one, please call me back. I will apologize publicly for embarrassing the church. But until that unity is fostered, until the TOC, the Northern Conference, the Sitsiva Conference, the Colored Conference, COSAP come together to have a unified space of work, don't waste my time. I think I'm speaking from a position of being a well-informed person within the organizational space that I worked for more than 25, 30 years on odds. And therefore, we cannot begin to even challenge that, because we know it's true. You have never seen a black president being a president in a white conference. You have not seen a white president becoming a president in a black conference in our present era. It is strictly divided according to racial issues. Blacks here, white here. Even after South Africa changed from the Transvaal, we still have our conferences called Transvaal Conference. We cannot even change a name just to match up with the political change. We are still in the Transvaal, which is the colonial naming of the conference. The conference here in Johannesburg, here, the Seventh Adventist Conference, is called TOC, Transvaal Conference. Transvaal Conference. The whites, because they are slightly smart, they changed their name from Transvaal Conference to the Trans-Orange Conference. Yes, Trans-Orange Conference. The other one was called Transvaal Conference. They changed to become the Northern Conference. You know, they're becoming smart. But still, you find that religious organizations are the slowest to change. Even when political systems seems to change and look us in the face to embarrass us that you should have done better prior, we still find that we are maintaining a colonial system, a colonial tradition, and anyone who challenges that is tended to be given names and etc. Well, you have eaten me, but praise the Lord, you can't finish me yet. I want to challenge the church, as it were, that let's put our house in order. Put that house in order. Conversations must begin. Solutions must be found. Major issues must be discussed. White and blacks who claim to be Christians must find each other. Or else, don't waste some of our time telling us about God. Hey, Brother Maponga, you have fallen. You have walked out of grace. I have fallen. And you are harboring segregation, and you are standing. I have fallen. And you, who cannot stand talking to each other, you are standing. You have guts of walking up to me and telling the whole world that Maponga is no longer. He has fallen. Honestly speaking, whatever you think and whatever you feel does not affect the price of bread or change the environment in which I am working. But if you hear me well, the purpose of creating organizations is that those organizations must be true to their mandate. If you say the gospel to all the world in this generation, it's neither Jew nor Gentile, Greek and etc. Why is it that our organizations are still functioning with a colonial mandate of separating people, running on the divide and rule concept? So, for extra information, Google Northern Conference, Seventh-day Adventist, Google Trans Orange Conference, TOC, Johannesburg, Google Southern African Division, which is in Irene, Google South African Union, which is in Bloemfontein, North KNFC, KwaZulu-Natal Fritzes Conference, that is in KZN, and all other conferences. Particularly this video is earmarked for the South African market, North American division, that we can no longer be hypocrites. I will look in your face and tell you, you are a racist church. Yes, you are a racist church. And you maintain racial segregation as a policy. If ever you have policies, you are not prepared to implement those policies. So stop being hypocrites and playing as if Adventism is above and beyond rebuke. Because your bones that are in your closets also, you are not prepared to address those issues. So I want to challenge everyone on the face of the earth, 20 million Seventh-day Adventists. What are you? What are we? What are they going to do about discussing racial discrimination and finding solutions in the 21st century? It's a shame of the highest order that at this late hour of this earth's history, we can still run organizations that are so archaic, backward, old-fashioned, and racially discriminative. It is not right. It is evil of the highest order. The church loses its moral voice to challenge the world and challenge the system of corruption and segregation when itself it's practicing the same habits. So this has nothing to do with buildings. It has to do with the people that are running these systems. If these people are corrupt, the system is corrupt. If the people are racially confused, the system will be racially confused also. With those few words, I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Cut and paste and share. If you have an Adventist friend, share. Ask them if what I am saying is true. If it is true, what are they going to do about it? If it is false, come back to me and challenge me. I'm prepared even to meet Wilson himself, Elder Dr. Solomon Maposa himself, and the other gentlemen in Bloemfontein. We can have this conversation. Don't tell me about platforms. This has nothing to do with platforms, because the system itself has platforms where it can discuss these things without embarrassing itself in public. Hey, we must do fix up our rubbish, our napkins in the closet. What closet? When it's actually written all over your faces that you are not interested in that addressing racial issues. So the other day I wake up in the morning, the union lawyer puts me up on social media that I'm not a minister. I've never been a minister. Well, I want to tell the honorable gentleman, to Mr. What is his name? What's the name of this guy? Dupree. Call him some Dupree gentleman. Go do your research, sir. I went to Solusi University, Andrews University, ID number 0214, the other one 07239. You can go and Google me in your system. That's my ID number at university, where I graduated as a theologian. I worked in Gweru's Central Zimbabwe Conference as a minister for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, from 1991 to 2000 plus. I moved into KZN, worked under the KwaZulu-Natal Free State Conference for years. I went to Swaziland, where I worked again in the conference there as an evangelist for the conference there. I went into America, where I worked in the South British Conference. And I came back to South Africa, where I worked hand in hand with the TOC, the SAU. I conducted your evangelistic and outreach programs with Dr. Wakawa himself, the ex-president. I went to school with most of your friends, and in fact, your cousin, Ron Dupree, was my systematic theology teacher. So please don't get excited, Elder Dupree. Sit down, drink coffee. Your racial issues are loud and clear. We know exactly what you represent and who you are working for. I don't think you are interested in the welfare of the black people at large. And we have heard how you treated Ketelo Mazibuko. I know exactly how you treated Mente, and you're running around like a bulldog trying to silence the black voice. Well, your days are numbered at the union in that office. You better start putting your house in order, and you may not live as long in terms of your official office duties with that kind of segregation. The majority, black people, are now part of the system. If it means that we put our vote of no confidence, I will be one of the person to raise my hand and help you to pack your bags and walk away from that office. You don't do that with public office, to use your official appointment to harass and abuse other workers. It's because of people like you that the issues that I'm addressing right now will never be addressed at the union level, never be addressed at the conference level, because all the ministers must be threatened, because there is some bulldog in the office here who's going to bellow and with hoof and bite us off. Therefore, the church, hush, hush, we can sit on top of rubbish and rubble in the name of fearing organizations. No, organizations have no blood. We are going to challenge systems until systems reform. Millions of people are in your hands. And if you keep them in the dark with this kind of information, you are not doing the organization a favor. You are actually destroying the same favor. The very truth that you think that you are representing, you are destroying it by behavior. Here's my few words pointed at the system. We need to reform. We need to start having conversations of racial integration. South African Seventh-day Adventist Church, when are you going to unite? With those few words, I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Tag, and share if you have Seventh-day Adventist friends around the world. Yours truly, Mapombe J, live from Johannesburg. Farmers of thought, developing patterns of thinking, creating new paradigms for the next generation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.